Tom, I want to say thank you for coming in and being willing to share. I wanted to say thank you as well for giving me the honour of sharing a little tiny bit of yours and Mikey's story on Sunday. But I just felt like people really resonated with that, and I felt it would be great for them to hear in your own words what God was prompting you to do in this particular act of obedience. And I know you and I have been having ongoing dialogue for probably a year now about obedience, and that, you know, delayed obedience is disobedience, and all of that. And I just wonder if you could share with us the story of Brett and the guy that you helped, but also a little bit about what led you to that moment and to that story of what God has done in and through you.
Yeah, so to put a bit of context, I guess the season, you know, given that this is about a year ago, just over a year ago, I guess one thing the Lord was working on in my life was my obedience to his direction. So listening to his voice, you know, discernment of that voice. And I mean, even with little things. So working with Vulnerable, I was starting to do a lot more work with Vulnerable around that time, but the Lord's direction was different to my direction in terms of what helping Vulnerable meant. So when I think about what I want to do to help Vulnerable, would be like, okay, this day I'm going to go out and do some stuff and help someone in need, versus I'm in my busy life and the Lord stops me and said something as simple as, hey, go say hello to that person. And part of that obedience was learning that that's more important than what I thought was important that day. So how quickly I needed to be going to a meeting or get into my car because I'm already running late. So during that season was learning to actually just listen to his voice and be obedient, as small as that request was.
Yeah.
And that was a tough time, because there was lots of occasions where it always seemed to be at a time where it was not convenient for me. It was not planned. It was not, you know, it was literally when the Lord needed me to do something. So learning to do that was where I was. So leading up to this point in time, you know, there was a number of examples where, you know, he would just tell me 3 meals, and I knew 3 meals was how many meals I had to go and buy, and I had to find 3 people to go and give them to. So that meant one night I actually walked about 6 kilometres until I find the 3rd person that meal belonged to. So that was, you know, tough in terms of learning that obedience. So leading up to that point was just another step in that sort of direction, where just slowly peeling or unpeeling the layers of resistance to being obedient was when Brett came along. Mm-hmm. And this was another example of I was literally driving down my own street, and there was just a guy, didn't look too vulnerable if you were to try and class it as a stereotype, but just said, hey, look, just say hello to that guy. So I just stopped, went down the window and was like, hey, how you going? And he sort of stopped because the car's just pulled up and, you know, said hello to him. And the Lord just said to me, he said, just ask him if he needs a lift. So I was like, that's fine. do you need a lift? He said, oh, actually, yes, I do need a lift. And I said, oh, that's great. Where are you heading? And he said, I've got a hotel just down the road. And at this stage, I didn't realise he was vulnerable. So he didn't have shoes on, and, you know, his clothes were a bit scruffy. But when you're driving past on the road, you don't notice these things. And that is just being obedient to whoever the Lord had asked me to say hello to, not thinking too logically or deep about this, as we all tend to do. So yeah, we picked him up and just got chatting to him, seeing how he's going. And the guy had apparently just bought him a hotel room in Broadbeach. So as I was driving down towards the hotel, the Lord just, again, kept speaking to me, very clearly, by the way. It's like, and asked me to ask if he had anywhere to stay. And of course, you know, silly question, someone's just given you a hotel for a few nights, you clearly don't have a house. So in that moment, I offered him a place, because that's what the Lord had asked me. Now, keeping in mind, I haven't spoken to Mikey yet. I haven't spoken to anyone really. I hadn't planned for, like, the tenants had only just moved out that I'd been leasing that to. So obviously my version was to still find tenants and move it in. So to do that was, well, immediately following his prompt, his direction, and being obedient in that moment. So I'm a very logical person. I apply a reason, risk assessment to all of my companies, my projects, And in that moment, without thinking about any of the risks, I hadn't even spoken to Mikey first and foremost. We just had Hart wasn't even 1 year old yet, right? So, we've got, if I was to really try and apply worldly risk to this, that would be safety, security foremost. What does this even look like? Financial, do I need that rental money to come in? Like, you can sit there and just talk yourself out of it. Or do I just be obedient? The Lord is clearly giving me direction here, and I just have to trust where this is going to go. So 2 days went by, we exchanged numbers, dropped him off, by the way. And so I did go home and talk to Mikey, and Mikey was supportive. She was like, yep, that's great. If the Lord's told you, sure. But since speaking to her about this, she even reflects and goes, well, I had to just trust you, because I had to trust you that you were speaking to God, that God was speaking to you. So there was a huge trust element that the Lord actually did give me that direction. And it wasn't just me off on a whim that day, and could be bringing someone who could be drug dependent, could be, alcohol, could have friends who are quite dangerous, bringing people around to the house. She had to trust that the Lord had given me direction, and then she had to trust that direction, not trust me, because trusting me would mean that I'm always there to protect her if something had gone wrong, which means she really did have to trust the Lord in this whole scenario.
Yeah.
So 2 days went by, and didn't get a call from him. I tried to call him, and we went to get groceries just at our local Coles, and there he was in the car park on his cardboard, and just camping out. And I was just like, Brett, well, what are you doing? I said, you were meant to call me. I said, I had a place for you to stay. He's like, oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. And I said, look, I'll drop my family home, and I'll come back and grab you. And come on down. I can't believe you didn't call me. This is silly. And, I think that's quite a coincidence that God brought us back together as well. I say coincidence, but I'm against coincidences. It was his plan that led us back to that moment. And so, I took him home that night, and just made him comfortable. And the Lord had only asked me, because I was asking the Lord, what am I meant to do now? What was I meant to do from this point forward? That's what I think a lot of us struggle with, is what do we do if we take somebody in? So what stops us half the time is it's I don't know what to do next. So I just really had to trust that, just giving him a roof over the head was just, and that's what the Lord said to me. He said, just give him hospitality. That's all I had to do. And so I took comfort in that I didn't have to go and talk to him every day. I did make sure he was okay, but I was like, you good? I knew he had, food and whatnot. I was just like, yeah, cool. Just let him to show hospitality. And that's when the relationship started to grow, and obviously, and don't get me wrong, I did have to, there's an element of wisdom here. So in taking him into our home, so he still was in the proximity of our home. It is a duplex split in half, but it is one house, right? And so I had said to him that, look, it's an open door policy. This is for you. It's not for anyone else to come and stay. So, I don't want people coming around the house. We've obviously got a little boy here as well. Obviously no drinking, drugs at the house, and made it very clear, if you break these, we do have to take the safety quite seriously. Now, he respected that. And anyone who's worked with vulnerable people will understand that, you don't really get to know them or what is truth or truth in their life until they start to trust you. And that didn't happen until over time, when they started to open up, and you get to hear their life story, and they share with you, and hopefully one day you can understand how they got to their circumstance, and then try to advocate and help them, get back to a secure position, which, we're talking over nearly a whole year, to a point where it was, we got him into accommodation, which was very difficult, and it's still difficult to this day. Changing that, homelessness is a very debilitating concept to be in a place of vulnerable, not just the reason you got there, but the environment once you're there, and if you hit rock bottom, right? So, it was,
What a journey.
It's a journey, and it's still going. So, now I feel like now I'm trying to rehabilitate, get his confidence to enter back into workforce, even if I can give him some work and maybe volunteer him just to get his confidence back, just to, become more, confident in himself. And it's funny because, he used to always say he's, what do you say? He was religiously agnostic. So he didn't, particularly like or dislike any. He was open to all religions. And I did get to share the full gospel with him at one stage where I was, almost got him to ask the Lord into his heart. And he said to me, Tom, I'm just not ready up, but I will one day. And I was like, oh, I'll just park this. And it's an ongoing journey. But I think the fact that when I saw that change over 12 months through that so I did get resistance, by the way. So, but over that 12 months period, he did start to loosen up to, wow, this person is just genuinely caring, showing love, not, like you sort of mentioned, not forcing the scripture down my throat as a like, I'm going to help you, but you have to, read the Bible with me every night. Just that demonstration of hospitality, just demonstration of love. Consistency is one thing they don't have.
Yeah.
And so over consistent time, of that showing of that same love, that same hospitality, I think he started to, definitely, the fact he was open to coming to maybe do some volunteer work at Pastor Aaron's church and maybe some grounds work, like he wouldn't have even come to the church, let alone be willing to even think about a working opportunity. So like I see that as a huge amount of change, growth, and I'm excited to see where this next chapter goes for him.
It's awesome. I think one of the keys that you mentioned was hospitality, and that's what we've been talking about with Risk lately. Is discipleship is constantly happening, and it can happen around the dining table, and it can happen just on the rhythms and the routines of life. And I think that that's a huge part of it, isn't it? When you can just walk the journey with someone, and that grace and the gospel of grace just happens in conversations. It's a beautiful thing. That's what transforms. Yeah,
definitely. And that's that obedience and us even just saying hello to somebody. That's a big passion of mine, is just to share with people how much of a difference you can make by showing just a little bit of grace, like hospitality. If it's a meal, if it's just a conversation, saying, like, I still to this day, the Lord will tap me on the shoulder and just say hello to that person. And the devil's always seeding that doubt for that direction. So like, well, why should I help that person? That person doesn't look like they need help. How many times does that go through our head, when really you look a little bit deeper and it's like, that person could be just lonely. They actually might not necessarily be homeless, but you saying hello to them and stopping for a conversation that day could be the difference. You don't know what battle they're fighting, they might be on a walk with the Lord themselves and wrestling with something. And if we've all heard that story, like, show me a sign. You could be that sign that day for them, for just someone out of the blue stopping and just saying, hey, how are you? Do you mind if I have a seat? How's your day been?
Cool. Tom, I just want to say thank you for coming in and sharing. I know you're a busy man, and I love actually what you mentioned in there about learning to be obedient in the midst of everything going on, because we can do mission, we can do discipleship, but there's something very powerful about when we surrender our lives enough to be interrupted by God in the midst of what we're doing and just about on the rhythms and routines. So thank you for sharing your story. It is inspirational. I know that there are so many in our church family who have stories, probably not like yours, but stories of where they've seen God do amazing things through their obedience and risk-taking. But I know that yours has really inspired. So thanks for being willing to share.
Oh, thank you.